All right, let's deep dive a feisty and frustrating loss out there in San Francisco. Chris Forsberg is still here, so is Phil Perry. John Tomase joining us. Tomase, how do you feel like the Celtics handled those antics from Mr. Green?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they got punked, that they let him get inside their head. And to me, the response is not, get down in the muck with him. They were pretty disciplined about not responding that way. But what he did was break their spirit early, and you just didn't see Celtics-like intensity, Celtics-like effort. That's how you respond to Draymond Green. It's not by pushing him back. It's not by trying to put your feet in his face. It's by getting in Steph Curry's face. It's by manning up against everybody else. The Celtics didn't do that, and I think he's the reason for it.
I'm not sure if he was the reason. I think they just don't know how to play with a lead. I think they just hate prosperity. I think the fact that they might have gone up 2-0 is one of the reasons why you see lackadaisical effort and lackadaisical passing that you mentioned in the last segment, Trenni. That to me is the real issue. I don't think it was Draymond specific. And if it was, let's be clear, if it was, that's a problem, because he's going to continue to do this all series long. So they have to be able to push through this and continue to play their game.
And honestly, in that first half, Chris Forsberg, I actually felt like the Celtics played with a good intensity on both. Even though the shots weren't maybe falling at a very consistent rate, they seemed to have, especially in that second quarter, they had some fight in them. And then it just completely disappeared. I do think that's a little bit on a Draymond Green, because it's almost as if he punched back and beat the Celtics at their own game.
And it started well before the game. He comes out after game one. He goes to the podium. He's like, hey, Al Horford, Derek White, they're not going to shoot like that again in this series. And instead of using it as motivation to go out there and really impose your will, the Celtics maybe got in their own head. And those guys were all pretty quiet throughout that game. And then what he did on the court, I don't know what the response is. I obviously heard Max say something like, you need to put him on the ground, or, I don't know if getting dragged into that. Certainly you could be hoping that maybe he gets tossed or whatever, but it's just clear he was in everybody's head. Every time I looked up, he was laying on top of someone with his leg on them, just getting them riled up, getting them unfocused on what was going on in the game. And I know it's infuriating. I told you before this series, he's going to be the guy that everybody hates. But if I take myself away from covering this team, man, I'd love to have him on my side. I know he's infuriating, but it's just, that's what he does, and he makes it so much more free for Steph and Klay to just do what they do. And he kind of rolls up his sleeves, and he's so good defensively, and he covers for them. And he doesn't get as much credit for it. So as infuriating as it sometimes is to watch. And my big thing is, why don't the officials ever call him? How does he have such leniency for someone who's always squawking? It's amazing.
Yeah, because I don't feel like that same sort of that's not afforded to Marcus Smart, right? Who is not at the level necessarily of Draymond Green, in terms of career-wise. But I don't know, is it good basketball? Do you like watching a guy? And I know we had a clip of him, basically, I mean, he was setting a screen, but it almost looked like a fullback or an offensive lineman. Here, he's pushing guys out of the way, clearing him out so that Steph Curry can, jump into that three-pointer from way beyond the arc. And that's just how he plays. And I mean, I don't know, is that good basketball, or is that like backyard brawling, Phil? Is that something that you want to watch? And I'm not quite sure, if you're the Celtics, how you battle back from that without getting the calls he doesn't get.
Yeah, that's not good basketball. It's ugly. It's gross. I don't know who would enjoy watching that. I think everyone enjoyed watching game one, right? Because the play was so free-flowing, and there wasn't all that much official involvement, and there wasn't all the throwing of the elbows and the stuff between the whistles. I like it, I guess, from a drama perspective, John, but from an actual basketball viewing perspective, I mean, you can go to your local Y and you can see less broken jumpers than what Draymond Green.
What happened is that there was question about whether or not that was a technical foul on Draymond Green. That would have been his second technical of the game, which would have meant that he was ejected from the game. And what Steve Javie was explaining there, Chris Forsberg, is, well, they don't call it because, you don't want a guy to get kicked out in that big of a situation, so you just sort of let it slide, which I personally hate, because if it's a technical foul, it's a technical foul. And you should know better than Draymond Green to control your emotions and not put your team in a position to get ejected.
So it would have been a double technical, and I don't love the idea of a player getting tossed in that situation. Maybe that's just more for the NBA rule book, need two individual technical fouls, not something that's a double T where they're just trying to prevent escalation. But I am curious, like, what would be the line? Like, if he had fully pantsed Jaylen Brown there and pulled down his shorts, is that enough for an ejection? It's always so subjective. I don't know how much the NBA loves Steve Javi coming out and admitting there's a human element to it, but I do think you have to be cognizant in that moment. And I don't think they're like, oh, the Warriors are down 1-0, so we can't throw this guy. I think it's just understanding that one of the big three on your team, you got to tread carefully with a disqualification like that.
I don't put it past officials to factor in where the series is at, where the score is at, where the technical situation is at. I think there's already too much art versus science when it comes to NBA officiating, and what they need to get to is to more of the science. They need to get more black and white, and I don't need them reading into given situations. If something's a technical foul, and that part we can debate, okay? I don't know if laying your legs on top of someone like they are a footrest in your living room is a technical foul. I don't know. But if normally it's a technical foul, which is what Jeff Van Gundy said and what Javi supposedly, I guess, agreed with, then call it the same every time. There's already too much discrepancy in terms of situation and score and series score, John. It's too much for me. I don't want these guys factoring in their opinion. If the call should have been a technical, then it should have been a double technical, and he should have been gone.
Phil, that is an awful take. I am an artist. You can be a nerd. You can be whatever you want. I am an artist.
You're an artist. They are not. The guys that officiate these games are not.
I want the art. I want there to be an art to refereeing, which there is. Draymond Green, there's no way he should be thrown out of that game in that situation for a double tech. And you know what? That's part of the brilliance of him, because he knew exactly how close to the line he could get. If he left his foot on his face for another half a second, maybe he's gone, but he didn't. That's the right call. He stays in that game.